For 5 long years, he'd been putting money aside. Every extra shift, every bonus check, every birthday gift from his parents went straight into his savings account. He had a goal, and nothing was going to stop him from reaching it. He wanted a car that he could be proud of, something that represented all those late nights and early mornings he'd put in at work. When he finally walked into that dealership on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, his heart was pounding. He'd done his research, compared dozens of models, and read hundreds of reviews. He knew exactly what he wanted: a midnight blue Tesla Model 3. Sleek, modern, and electric. It was everything he'd dreamed about. The salesman noticed his excitement right away. He was 28 years old, worked as a software developer, and this was the biggest purchase of his life. When he signed the final papers and got handed those keys, his hands were actually shaking. He sat in the driver's seat, breathed in that new car smell, and felt like he'd accomplished something real. This wasn't just a car. This was proof that hard work paid off. The drive home was magical. He took the long way, wanting to enjoy every minute behind the wheel. The car was silent except for the slight hum of the electric motor. The acceleration was smooth and powerful. He couldn't stop grinning like an idiot. He lived in a place called Meadowbrook Estates. It was a decent neighborhood with rows of townhouses, well-maintained lawns, and a community pool that nobody really used. He'd been renting a 2-bedroom townhouse there for about 2 years. The rent was reasonable, his neighbors were mostly quiet, and it was close to his office. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Like most suburban neighborhoods these days, Meadowbrook Estates had a homeowners association, an HOA. For those who don't know, an HOA is supposed to keep the neighborhood looking nice and handle community issues. In theory, it's a good idea. In practice, well, it depends on who's running it. And Meadowbrook Estates had Patricia. Henderson was in her mid-50s, always wore designer athleisure wear, and drove a white Mercedes SUV that she washed every single Saturday morning. She'd lived in the neighborhood for over a decade and had somehow appointed herself as the unofficial queen of the HOA board. Officially, there were 5 board members. Realistically, Patricia made all the decisions, and everyone else just nodded along. Everyone in the neighborhood had a nickname for her, though nobody dared say it to her face. HOA Karen. It fit perfectly. She had that distinctive haircut, the attitude, and the endless need to control everything around her. She lived for finding violations and handing out fines. He'd heard the stories when he first moved in. One neighbor got fined because their trash cans were visible from the street for more than 12 hours. Another got a violation notice because their welcome mat was the wrong shade of brown. Someone else had their Halloween decorations reported because they left them up until November 2nd instead of taking them down on November 1st. The rule stated all holiday decorations must be removed within 24 hours of the holiday ending. Patricia took the HOA rule book like it was scripture. She'd walk around the neighborhood with a clipboard, literally looking for things to complain about. Garden gnomes in someone's flower bed? Violation for unapproved lawn decorations? Kids' bikes left on the driveway overnight? Violation for visual clutter? A car parked slightly crooked? You better believe that's a violation. But here's the thing about people like Patricia. If you stayed under their radar and followed every single rule down to the letter, you could usually avoid problems. And that's exactly what he'd been doing for 2 years. He kept his small patio spotless. He never left his trash cans out. He parked perfectly in his designated spot every single time. He even made sure his front door wreath was removed within the required time frame after each holiday. Patricia had never bothered him, not once. He was the invisible resident, and he liked it that way. Until he bought the Tesla. When he pulled into his parking spot that first evening, he was still riding high on the excitement. He took his time, made sure he was perfectly centered between the lines, and locked the car. He stood there for a moment, just admiring it in the fading sunlight. The blue paint had this gorgeous metallic shimmer. It looked even better than it had at the dealership. He noticed Patricia walking her tiny dog past his townhouse. She slowed down, stared at the car, and kept walking without saying anything. Her expression was unreadable, but something about the way she looked at his car made him slightly uncomfortable. It was the same look someone might give to something that offended them personally. He shook it off. He was being paranoid. It was just a car. That night, he could barely sleep. He kept thinking about his Tesla sitting in the parking lot. Was it really safe? Should he have gotten a car cover? He got up twice to look out his window and make sure it was still there. Both times, it sat exactly where he'd left it, gleaming under the parking lot lights. The next morning, he woke up early, excited to drive his new car to work. He grabbed his laptop bag, his coffee, and headed outside. That's when he saw it, a piece of paper tucked under his windshield wiper, a bright yellow piece of paper that could only mean one thing in Meadowbrook Estates. An HOA violation notice. His stomach dropped. He pulled the paper out and read it. Your vehicle is parked 6 inches over the designated parking line. This is a direct violation of HOA Code 7.3.2. Please correct this immediately or face a $50 fine. Parking violations are taken seriously in our community. We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining our standards. It was signed by Patricia Henderson, HOA Board President. He looked at his car. Then he looked at the parking lines. His car was perfectly centered. He'd been extra careful about that. There was no way he was over the line by even an inch, let alone 6 inches. He pulled out his phone and took photos from multiple angles. The car was absolutely, perfectly, completely within the lines. This violation notice was bogus. It was completely made up. But why? Why would Patricia target him now? He'd never had a problem with her before. Then it hit him. The car. She'd stared at his car last night with that weird look on her face. Was she really petty enough to be bothered by someone having a nice car? That seemed ridiculous, but based on everything he'd heard about her, maybe it wasn't that far-fetched. He crumpled up the notice and tossed it in his trash can. He wasn't going to let this ruin his day. It was probably just a mistake. Maybe she'd written down the wrong unit number or something. These things happen. He drove to work, and the car performed beautifully. By lunchtime, he'd almost forgotten about the violation notice, but Patricia hadn't forgotten about him. And this was just the beginning. The violation notices kept coming. Not once in a while, not occasionally, every single day. Day 2, there was another yellow paper on his windshield. Your vehicle's paint finish is creating excessive glare that may disturb other residents. Please consider a matte finish or vehicle cover. HOA Code 9.1.4 states that residents must be considerate of their neighbor's comfort. He read it 3 times. Was she serious? The car was supposed to be shiny. That's what car paint does. It reflects light. Was he supposed to drive a rusty bucket to make her happy? Day 3. Electric vehicles must be registered with the HOA office within 48 hours of arrival on the property. Failure to register may result in fines up to $200. He called the HOA office. A nervous-sounding guy named Barry answered. Barry was the property manager, a middle-aged man who always looked like he was apologizing for something even when he hadn't done anything wrong. Hi, I need to register my electric vehicle. I got a notice saying I have to. There was a long pause. We don't actually have a registration process for electric vehicles. That's not a real rule. So this violation notice is fake. Another pause. I mean, Patricia wrote it, so it's technically official. But there's nothing in the bylaws about registering electric cars. I can talk to her if you want. Would you? I'll try. Barry didn't sound confident. Day 4. Your charging cable poses a tripping hazard to residents and guests. All cables must be secured and hidden from view per Safety Code 3.7. This one made him laugh out loud in frustration. He charged his car in his garage. The garage door was closed when he charged. Nobody could see the cable, let alone trip over it. Patricia was literally making things up at this point. He took photos of his closed garage door and sent them to Barry with a polite email explaining that the violation was impossible. Barry responded with, "I'll look into it." And nothing changed. His coworkers started noticing his mood shifting. He was distracted, annoyed, constantly checking his phone for messages from the HOA. His friend at work asked what was wrong, and when he explained, she just shook her head. Dude, you've got an HOA Karen. My cousin dealt with one of those. They don't stop until they get bored or you move out. I'm not moving out because some middle-aged woman doesn't like my car. Then you better get ready for war, because she's not going to stop. He didn't want war. He just wanted to enjoy his car in peace. But his friend was right. Patricia wasn't stopping. The notes evolved from violations to passive-aggressive suggestions. One morning, he found a printed article about the environmental concerns of lithium mining, tucked under his wiper. Another day, it was a flyer for a local used car dealership with more modest options circled in red pen. Then came the parking situation. He left for work one Monday morning at his usual time, 7:30. His car was in his designated spot, exactly where it should be. When he came home at 6 that evening, Patricia's white Mercedes SUV was parked diagonally across both his spot and the guest spot next to it, not just a little over the line. Completely diagonal, taking up 2 full spaces. He sat in his Tesla in the parking lot, staring at her Mercedes, feeling his blood pressure rising. His spot was clearly marked with his unit number. There was no way this was an accident. He parked in a visitor spot on the other side of the complex and walked to Patricia's townhouse. It was the largest unit, a corner lot with an elaborate garden that probably violated about 15 of her own rules about lawn uniformity. He knocked on her door. She answered wearing yoga pants and a tank top, holding a green smoothie. "Can I help you?" She said it like she'd never seen him before in her life. "Your car's parked in my spot." "Oh, is it? I needed extra space for my yoga equipment." "I'm hosting a class tonight. You can park on the street." She started to close the door. "Wait, that's my assigned spot. I pay rent that includes that parking space." Patricia sighed dramatically. "It's just for one night. Don't be difficult. This is a community. We share. The HOA rules say parking in someone else's spot can result in towing." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just stating what the rules say. The same rules you quote to me every single day. I'm on the HOA board. I think I know what the rules say better than you do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests arriving." She closed the door in his face. He stood there for a moment, stunned. The audacity was unbelievable. He pulled out his phone and took photos of her Mercedes in his spot, making sure the unit numbers were visible in the frame. The next morning, her car was gone. His spot was empty. He parked his Tesla and headed to work, hoping that was the end of it. It wasn't. For the next 2 weeks, Patricia played parking roulette. Some days his spot would be empty. Other days her Mercedes would be there when he got home from work. Once it was parked so close to the line that he couldn't fit his car in even if he tried. Another time she parked directly behind his car, blocking him in until he knocked on her door at 11 at night. Each time he complained, she had an excuse. She was just running in for a minute. She didn't realize that was his spot. She needed space for deliveries, for guests, for her Pilates equipment, for her son's visit. Barry, the property manager, was useless. Every time he called, Barry would promise to send her a reminder email about parking rules. Nothing ever changed. Other neighbors started noticing. A few of them pulled him aside to share their own Patricia horror stories. One guy had gotten 17 violation notices in a single month for various made-up infractions. A woman down the street had been fined because her doorbell camera was too visible and intimidating to guests. An elderly couple had been harassed about their garden decorations until they just gave up and moved out. "Why doesn't anyone report her?" he asked. "To who?" "She runs the HOA. Barry's terrified of her. The other board members are her friends. There's nobody to report her to." But the worst was yet to come. It happened on a Saturday morning. He'd been planning to sleep in, finally get some rest after a brutal week at work. Instead, he woke up at 8:15 to the sound of metal scraping against metal. That distinctive, horrifying, nails-on-chalkboard sound of something sharp dragging across car paint. He jumped out of bed, didn't even bother with shoes, and ran outside in his pajama pants and t-shirt. What he saw made his heart stop. Patricia was standing in the parking lot, arms crossed, holding her phone up like she was recording something, and next to his Tesla was a teenage kid, maybe 16 or 17, with a key in his hand. A long, deep scratch ran down the entire passenger side of his car, from the front door all the way to the back bumper. The kid was still dragging the key along the paint. "Hey!" he shouted, running toward them. "What are you doing?" The kid jumped back, startled. Patricia didn't even flinch. "Oh, we were just admiring your car," Patricia said sweetly, still holding up her phone. My son thinks Teslas are interesting. He's keying my car. I literally just watched him do it. I don't know what you're talking about. That scratch must have already been there. You probably just didn't notice it. He looked at the scratch. It was fresh, the metal underneath the paint gleaming in the morning sun. It was at least 3 feet long, deep enough that it would definitely need professional repair. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Patricia said. We're just standing here. You can't prove anything. But here's what Patricia didn't know. He could prove everything. Tesla's Sentry mode had been recording the entire time. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Patricia and her son just stood there, watching him with these smug expressions like they'd already won. I need to report vandalism, he said when the dispatcher answered. Someone just keyed my car and I have video evidence. Patricia's smile faltered just a little bit. Video evidence? What are you talking about? He didn't answer her. He stayed on the line with the dispatcher, giving his address and explaining what happened. The whole time, Patricia kept insisting that her son didn't do anything, that the scratch was already there, that he was making false accusations. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers, a younger guy and an older woman who looked like she'd seen everything twice. They listened to both sides of the story. Patricia put on quite a performance, acting shocked and offended that anyone would accuse her precious son of such a terrible thing. Officer, we were simply walking through the parking lot. My son admires electric vehicles. He wants to be an environmental engineer someday. We would never damage someone's property. This man is clearly mentally unstable and is harassing us. The younger officer looked skeptical but professional. Sir, do you have any proof that this young man damaged your vehicle? Yes, my car has cameras that record when someone gets too close. It's called Sentry mode. Patricia's face went pale. That's an invasion of privacy. You can't record people without their consent. The older officer shook her head. Ma'am, if the camera is on his vehicle recording his property in a public parking lot, that's completely legal. He pulled up the Tesla app on his phone, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. The Sentry mode footage was all there, saved and ready to view. He handed his phone to the officers. They watched in silence. Even from where he stood, he could hear the audio. Crystal clear. Patricia's voice saying, Go ahead, teach him a lesson about showing off. The teenage kid saying, You sure, Mom? And Patricia responding, He thinks he's better than everyone with his fancy car. Show him what happens when you don't respect this community. Then the sound of metal scraping against metal as the key dragged along the paint. The older officer's expression hardened. She looked at Patricia, then at her son. Ma'am, this video clearly shows your son vandalizing this vehicle, and it appears you instructed him to do so. Patricia's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The smugness vanished, replaced by panic. That's not what happened. That's taken out of context. We were joking around. I never told him to actually do anything. The video has audio, ma'am. This is entrapment. He set us up. He probably paid my son to do this. The younger officer looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Ma'am, that doesn't make any sense. They took statements from everyone. The officers examined the scratch, took photos from multiple angles and made copies of the video footage. They explained that he could press charges, but since the person who did the actual damage was a minor, it would be complicated. However, Patricia could be charged as well, since she clearly instructed her son to commit the vandalism. Patricia tried to bargain. Look, this is all a misunderstanding. I'll pay for the damage. We don't need to involve lawyers and courts. I'm on the HOA board. I have a reputation to maintain. You should have thought about that before you told your son to key someone's car, the older officer said flatly. After the police left, he just stood there staring at his beautiful Tesla with that ugly scratch running down the side. He felt sick. All that saving, all that work, and someone damaged it out of pure spite within a week of him owning it. He called his insurance company. They told him to get a repair estimate. He called a Tesla-approved body shop. They scheduled him for an inspection the following Tuesday. That Tuesday, he took the car in. The technician examined it, took measurements, and shook his head. This is a deep one. We'll need to repaint the entire passenger side to make sure the color matches. With a metallic finish like this, you can't just patch it. How much? Parts and labor? About $3,200. His stomach dropped. His insurance deductible was $1,000. Even with insurance covering the rest, He was out $1,000 because Patricia couldn't handle seeing someone drive a nice car. The repair would take 2 weeks. They gave him a basic rental car, nothing fancy. Driving that rental after experiencing his Tesla felt like going from a smartphone back to a flip phone. But he wasn't just angry anymore. He was determined. Patricia thought she could bully him like she'd bullied everyone else in the neighborhood. She thought she was untouchable because she ran the HOA board. She was wrong. He spent the next 3 days doing research. Real research. The kind of deep dive investigation he usually reserved for work projects. He started with the HOA bylaws, all 73 pages of them. He read every single rule, every amendment, every clause. Then he started looking into Patricia herself. Property records were public information. He looked up her address on the county assessor's website. That's when he found something interesting. Patricia's home address on file with the county was in Riverside Heights, the next town over. Not Meadowbrook Estates. He dug deeper. Tax records showed she owned a property in Riverside Heights and had been paying property taxes there for the past 12 years. He cross-referenced with the Meadowbrook Estates HOA records that were available to residents online. Patricia had listed her Meadowbrook address as her primary residence to qualify for the HOA board. According to the bylaws, Section 12.4, only residents who lived in Meadowbrook Estates as their primary residence could serve on the HOA board. It made sense. You shouldn't be making rules for a community you don't actually live in. But there was more. He started mapping out the parking situation. Each unit in Meadowbrook Estates came with one assigned parking spot. He pulled up the original parking assignment documents from when he'd signed his lease. His spot was number 47, clearly marked and assigned to his unit. He looked up Patricia's parking assignment. She didn't have one, because she didn't actually live there. The spot she kept parking in, the one she claimed she needed for her yoga equipment and guests? That was guest parking spot G12. She'd been treating it like her personal space for months, maybe years. She'd even put a little sign up that said reserved, even though guest spots specifically couldn't be reserved according to Section 8.2 of the bylaws. He printed everything. Property records, tax documents, parking assignments, HOA bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted. He made 3 copies of everything and put them in labeled folders. Then he looked up the HOA management company's corporate office. Barry might be scared of Patricia, but Barry had bosses. People who could lose their contract if they were allowing board members to violate the bylaws they were supposed to enforce. He also looked up the process for calling an emergency HOA meeting. According to the bylaws, any resident could petition for an emergency meeting if they had evidence of board misconduct. They needed signatures from at least 15% of the residents. Meadowbrook Estates had 84 units. 15% meant he needed signatures from 13 residents. He started knocking on doors that evening. He brought his folders with him. Most people were home after work, and most people were very interested in what he had to say. The first neighbor he talked to was an older man named Tom, who lived 3 units down. Tom opened the door, saw him standing there, and immediately said, "If this is about Patricia, I'm in. Whatever you're planning, count me in. That woman fined me $50 because my mailbox flag was the wrong shade of red." By 9 that night, he had 15 signatures. By the end of the week, he had 32. People came to him. They'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that someone was finally doing something about Patricia, and they wanted to help. He submitted the petition for an emergency meeting to Barry. Barry called him the next day, sounding even more nervous than usual. "I got your petition. This is pretty serious stuff you're alleging. It's all documented. Property records don't lie. Patricia is going to lose her mind when she finds out." "That's not really my problem, Barry." There was a long silence. Then Barry said something that surprised him. "Good. Someone needed to stand up to her. I'll schedule the meeting for next month." "Next month?" "The bylaws say emergency meetings have to happen within 2 weeks of a valid petition." Another pause. "You're right. I'll schedule it for next Thursday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse." He hung up and allowed himself a small smile. The pieces were falling into place, but he had one more move to make. The big one. The move that would hit Patricia where it hurt most. Her precious white Mercedes SUV. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, but he had no intention of waiting until Thursday to make his move. He'd spent hours researching towing companies, Not just any towing company, but ones that specialized in HOA enforcement. These were businesses that understood property law, parking violations, and how to handle situations exactly like this one. He found a company called Metro Property Towing. Their website was professional, their reviews were solid, and they had a specific section about HOA parking enforcement. He called them on Saturday morning. Metro Property Towing, this is Vincent. Hi, I need to report an illegally parked vehicle in my HOA community. Okay, I'll need some information. What's the situation? He explained everything. The HOA bylaws about assigned parking, Patricia's lack of an assigned spot, the documentation proving she didn't actually live in Meadowbrook Estates, the repeated parking violations in his spot and guest spots. Vincent listened carefully. And you have documentation for all of this? I have property records, tax documents, HOA bylaws, parking assignments, photos of her vehicle in unauthorized spots on multiple dates. Everything. That's solid. Most people call us without any documentation and we can't help them. When do you want us to tow the vehicle? Monday morning. She's there every Monday morning for the HOA board coffee meeting. We can do that. I'll need you to email me all the documentation first so we can verify everything is legal. If it all checks out, we'll handle it. He spent the rest of Saturday scanning and organizing documents. Sunday morning, he sent everything to Vincent. By Sunday afternoon, Vincent called him back. Everything looks good. This is a clear violation. The vehicle is parked in a community where the owner doesn't have residential status or an assigned spot. We're legally authorized to tow. Our rate is $350 for the tow plus $75 per day storage. We have a mandatory 2-day hold for verification purposes before the vehicle can be released. That's fine. Monday morning around 10:30. We'll be there. Monday morning felt like the longest morning of his life. He'd taken a personal day from work, telling his boss he had to handle a property issue. He made coffee, tried to read, paced around his townhouse. He kept checking his watch. At 10:15, he positioned himself at his front window where he could see the parking lot. Patricia's white Mercedes was parked in guest spot G12, just like it always was on Monday mornings. Through his window, he could see the clubhouse where the HOA board held their weekly coffee meeting. At 10:47, a blue and white tow truck with Metro Property Towing on the side pulled into Meadowbrook Estates. His heart started pounding. This was really happening. The driver stepped out. He was a big guy, professional-looking, carrying a clipboard. He walked directly to Patricia's Mercedes, took photos of it from multiple angles, checked the license plate, and compared something on his clipboard. Then he got to work. The whole process took about 12 minutes. The driver positioned the truck, attached the Mercedes to the tow mechanism, and lifted the front wheels off the ground. The backup beeper was loud enough that a few neighbors came out to watch. One of them saw him in his window and gave him a thumbs up. At 11:23, Patricia emerged from the clubhouse holding a paper coffee cup and laughing at something another board member had said. She froze mid-step when she saw her parking. Spot was empty. He watched as confusion crossed her face. Then panic, then absolute rage. She dropped her coffee cup. It splattered across the pavement. She spun in a circle, looking around wildly like her Mercedes might be hiding somewhere. Then she pulled out her phone and started making calls. Even from inside his townhouse, he could hear her shouting. She called someone, yelled at them, hung up, called someone else. This went on for about 5 minutes. Then she started walking through the parking lot, looking in every row like maybe she'd forgotten where she parked. Other board members came out of the clubhouse to see what was wrong. Patricia was gesturing frantically, pointing at the empty spot, her face getting redder and redder. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but he could imagine. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled into the parking lot. Patricia practically ran to it, waving her arms. 2 officers got out and she started talking at them so fast they had to ask her to slow down. The conversation went on for about 10 minutes. At one point, one of the officers walked over to the spot where Patricia's car had been and looked around like he was checking for evidence of theft. The other officer was taking notes. Then they talked to Patricia some more. He could tell the exact moment they told her the tow was legal, because she went from animated to completely deflated. Her shoulders slumped. She put her hand over her mouth. The officers got back in their car and left. Patricia stood in the parking lot alone, staring at the empty space where her Mercedes used to be. That's when he decided to make his appearance. He walked outside casually, like he was just heading to his car for a normal Monday drive. He had his keys in his hand, and he'd made sure to bring the folder of documents. Just in case, Patricia spotted him immediately. Her head snapped up and her eyes locked onto him like a missile acquiring a target. "You." She started walking toward him fast, her hands balled into fists. "You did this. You had my car towed. I know it was you." He stopped walking and faced her calmly. Other neighbors were watching now, some from their windows, some standing in their doorways. "Patricia, I didn't tow your car. A professional towing company did because your vehicle was illegally parked. That's my spot. I park there every Monday. Guest spots can't be permanently claimed. That's in the bylaws. Section 8.2. I'm on the HOA board. I have every right to park there." This was the moment. He pulled the folder out from under his arm and opened it calmly. "Actually, you don't have the right to park anywhere in Meadowbrook Estates, because according to county property records, you don't live here." Patricia's face went from red to purple. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I live here. Your primary residence is listed at 847 Riverside Heights Drive. You've been paying property taxes there for 12 years. You own that property, this address in Meadowbrook? You don't own it. You're not on any lease. You don't live here. That's private information. You had no right to look that up. Property records are public information. Anyone can access them. And according to HOA Bylaws Section 12.4, board members must be primary residents of Meadowbrook Estates, which you're not." A small crowd had gathered now. At least a dozen neighbors were watching and listening. Some of them had their phones out, recording. Patricia looked around wildly, realizing she had an audience. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police again." "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing. Your car was towed legally because it was parked without authorization. In a community where you don't have residential status, the towing company has all the documentation. I made sure of that. Where's my car? Where did they take it?" He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app where he'd saved the towing company's information. "Metro Property Towing. Their lot is in East Valley, about 40 miles from here. You'll need to provide proof of residency and a valid parking permit to get your car back." "I don't need a parking permit. I'm on the HOA board." "Not according to the bylaws. And there's an emergency meeting scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. to discuss your position on the board. I'd suggest you attend." Patricia opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air. She couldn't seem to form words. Her hands were shaking. Tom, the neighbor from 3 units down, called out from his doorway. "How much does it cost to get the car back, Patricia? Maybe you can pay for it with all those bogus fines you've been collecting from everyone." A few people laughed. Someone else shouted, "About time someone stood up to you." Patricia looked around at the faces of her neighbors, people she'd been harassing for years, and saw nothing but satisfaction and barely concealed joy at her situation. "This isn't over," she hissed at him. "I'll have you evicted. I'll sue you. I'll make your life miserable." He held up his phone. "I'm recording this conversation just so you know. And I'd be very careful about making threats, especially since you're currently under investigation for instructing your son to vandalize my vehicle. The police have that video footage, remember?" Patricia's face crumpled. For a moment, he almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then he remembered watching her son drag a key down his car while she filmed and encouraged him. "How do I get my car back?" Her voice was small now, defeated. "Call the towing company. They'll explain the process. You'll need to pay the towing fee, storage fees, and provide documentation proving you have authorization to park on this property, which you don't have because you don't live here. So honestly, I'm not sure how you're going to get it back. This is insane. I've been parking here for 8 months. Illegally. For 8 months. Barry appeared from the clubhouse looking mortified. "Patricia, maybe we should talk in the office." "Don't touch me!" Patricia snapped at him. She turned back to face him one more time. "Thursday at 7 p.m., I'll be there. And I'll have lawyers." "Good, bring them. I have property records, tax documents, HOA bylaws, and about 30 residents who signed a petition supporting this meeting." "I'm very much looking forward to Thursday, Patricia S." Thursday evening arrived like Christmas morning for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. By 6:30, people were already filtering into the clubhouse. The room normally held about 40 people comfortably. By 6:45, there were at least 60 people crammed in there, with more standing in the doorway. He arrived at 6:50 carrying his folder of documentation. The room went quiet when he walked in. People nodded at him, gave him thumbs up, mouthed, "Good luck." He felt like a prize fighter entering the ring. Barry was standing at the front of the room looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. The other 4 board members sat at a long table, all of them looking uncomfortable. Patricia wasn't there yet. At 6:58, Patricia walked in. She'd clearly spent time preparing. Professional business suit, hair done, makeup perfect. She walked in like she owned the place, chin up, shoulders back. But he could see the tension in her jaw, the way her hands gripped her leather portfolio just a little too tight. She sat down at the board table without looking at anyone in the crowd. At exactly 7 p.m., Barry cleared his throat. "Okay, we're calling this emergency HOA meeting to order. We're here because a petition was submitted by a resident, signed by over 30% of the community, alleging misconduct by a board member. The floor is open for discussion." He stood up. "I'll keep this simple. Patricia Henderson has been serving on this HOA board for 3 years. According to Section 12.4 of our bylaws, board members must be primary residents of Meadowbrook Estates. Patricia's primary residence is 847 Riverside Heights Drive, which she owns and where she pays property taxes. She does not live in this community and therefore has been serving on this board illegally." He walked to the front and handed copies of his documentation to Barry and the other board members. Property records, tax documents, everything clearly printed and highlighted. Patricia stood up. "This is a witch hunt. I've dedicated years to this community. I've maintained our standards, kept property values high, and enforced the rules that keep this neighborhood beautiful. And this is how I'm repaid? With accusations and harassment? Where do you live, Patricia?" Someone called out from the crowd. "That's personal information." "It's public record," he said calmly. "You live in Riverside Heights. You've lived there for 12 years. The question is, why have you been pretending to live here?" Barry was flipping through the documents, his face getting paler with each page. He looked at Patricia. "These property records are legitimate. The address on file with the county doesn't match what you listed on your board application. I have a unit here. I visit regularly. Do you own or rent a unit in Meadowbrook Estates?" Barry asked. Patricia hesitated. "I have access to a unit. That's not what I asked." "Do you own or rent a unit here?" "My cousin owns a unit. I stay there sometimes." "I have keys," the room erupted. People were shouting questions, making comments. Barry had to bang a gavel 3 times to restore order. One of the other board members, a woman in her 60s, spoke up. "Patricia, if you don't actually live here, that means every vote you've cast, every fine you've issued, every decision you've made for the past 3 years has been invalid. You had no legal authority to do any of that. That's ridiculous. You all knew where I lived." "Actually, we didn't," another board member said. "You listed the Meadowbrook address on all your paperwork. You told us you lived in Unit 32. I do. I have access to it. Does your cousin know you've been using their address to claim residency?" Patricia didn't answer. He stood up again. "There's more. Patricia has been illegally occupying guest parking spot G12 for at least 8 months, treating it as her personal reserved space. Guest spots cannot be reserved per Section 8.2 of the bylaws. She also issued me multiple fabricated violation notices, including citations for violations that don't exist in the bylaws, such as requiring registration of electric vehicles. Those notices were legitimate." "Really?" "Because Barry confirmed there's no rule about registering electric vehicles. He confirmed it in an email. I have it printed here." He held up another piece of paper. Barry nodded miserably. "And let's not forget the video evidence of Patricia instructing her son to vandalize my vehicle while she filmed it. That footage has been submitted to the police and is part of an ongoing investigation." The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Patricia. That was taken out of context," Patricia stammered. "The video has audio, clear audio, of you telling your son to teach me a lesson about showing off." Tom stood up from the back of the room. "I want to know how many of the fines she's issued over the past 3 years were legitimate. If she had no authority to be on the board, then none of those fines are valid, right? Do we get refunds?" The room erupted again. People were pulling out their phones, talking about the hundreds of dollars they'd paid in bogus fines. One woman shouted that she'd paid over $600 in various violation fees in the past year alone. Barry looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "I'll need to consult with the HOA attorney about the fines. This is unprecedented. What about the towing incident?" Patricia demanded, pointing at him. He had my car towed illegally. That's harassment. The tow was legal, he said. I contacted a licensed towing company that specializes in HOA enforcement. I provided them with documentation proving you had no authorization to park on this property. They verified everything before towing the vehicle. If you believe it was illegal, you're welcome to sue the towing company. I'm sure they'd be happy to present their documentation in court. Where's your car now, Patricia? Someone called out. That's none of your business. Still at the impound lot? How much is that costing you per day? Patricia's face was bright red. She looked around the room at the sea of hostile faces. These were people she'd been bullying for years, and every single one of them was enjoying watching her squirm. Barry cleared his throat. Given the evidence presented, I think we need to vote on Patricia's continued service on the HOA board. All in favor of removing Patricia Henderson from the board due to residency violations, please raise your hand. All 4 of the other board members raised their hands immediately. The motion passes unanimously. Patricia, effective immediately, you are removed from the HOA board. You'll need to return all HOA property, including keys, documents, and access cards by the end of the week. Patricia stood up, grabbed her portfolio, and walked toward the door. She stopped when she got level with him. You've ruined everything, she said quietly. I hope you're proud of yourself. I didn't ruin anything. You did that all by yourself when you decided to key my car. She left without another word. The room burst into applause the moment the door closed behind her. The meeting continued for another hour. Barry explained that the HOA attorney would review every fine issued during Patricia's tenure and determine which ones needed to be refunded. They'd also be reviewing all of her decisions to see what needed to be reversed or revisited. Someone motioned to add language to the bylaws requiring board members to provide proof of residency annually. It passed unanimously. After the meeting, at least 20 people came up to thank him. Tom bought him a beer at the local bar down the street. You did what all of us wanted to do for years, Tom said, clinking bottles with him. That woman made this neighborhood miserable. The next morning, he got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of him. Hello? This is Vincent from Metro Property Towing. Just wanted to give you an update. Patricia Henderson picked up her vehicle yesterday afternoon. Total fees were $575. She was not happy about it. I bet she wasn't. Thanks for the update. No problem. And hey, thanks for having all that documentation ready. Made our job a lot easier. Most people call us without proper paperwork and we can't help them. 2 weeks later, he got another call, this time from Patricia's lawyer. They were demanding he pay for the damage to the Mercedes caused during towing, drop the vandalism charges against her son, and issue a public apology. He forwarded the letter to his own lawyer, who called back laughing. This is absurd. They have no case. The tow was completely legal and documented, and the vandalism charge is based on video evidence. Tell them if they want to pursue this, you'll be happy to see them in court. Patricia's lawyer never called back. The vandalism case took a few months to work through the system. Patricia's son was ultimately charged as a juvenile. As part of the settlement, Patricia had to pay full restitution for the damage to his Tesla. The final amount, including court costs and fees, came to just over $4,000. His insurance had already covered the repair minus his $1,000 deductible. When the restitution check arrived, he got his deductible back plus interest. He deposited the check with a smile. The Tesla looked good as new. Better than new, actually, because the body shop had done such an amazing job with the paint. 6 months after the emergency meeting, Barry approached him in the parking lot. Hey, I wanted to thank you. Since Patricia left, this job has been so much easier. People aren't constantly complaining. The board actually works together now. We even revised a bunch of the more ridiculous rules. That's great, Barry. Also, there's an open board position. We're holding elections next month. Yo?